Join spiritual feminist and empowerment coach Joni Advent Maher for Trust Your Sacred Feminine Flow. Listen in for intimate conversations about money, transformation, and feminine sovereignty. And now, your host, Joni Advent Maher.
Welcome to Trust Your Sacred Feminine Flow. I'm your host, Joni Advent Maher, mystic, spiritual midwife, and a transformational guide. And today I want to push the envelope a little bit and talk about a subject that for those of us who've lived in the good girl paradigm or have been reluctant leaders in our lives is going to be edgy. It may feel as edgy as talking about money or talking about sex. It's the concept of us embracing, embodying, and owning our power, our full power, which can feel revolutionary despite the fact that there's lots of talk these days about empowerment and being empowered. But for those of us who have been coming out of the good girl paradigm, those of us of a certain age who have learned to be pleasing and not make waves, this can be a big stretch. This can feel really daring. And while I have talked about for years the idea of sovereignty, what's really at the root of that is claiming our power. It's about embracing and embodying our potency, our vibrancy, our vital aliveness. We're at a time of spring right now where we are just seeing the potency of life, and that is something that we hold within us. And for most of us, whether it's learning to make apologies for that, or learning to squelch it, or to tamp it down, or to hide it, or to shift it into forms that are not quite direct. So in our journey back to wholeness, in our journey to become the women we were born to be, we have to face this issue of making peace with our power. And because we live in an overculture, we live in a paradigm that equates power with power over, that patriarchal approach to power, which is domination or dominion over, having power over. And no doubt each of us has either witnessed or experienced more times than anyone should abuses of power. We witness it every day in the world around us. You may have experienced it as a child growing up. You may be experiencing it in your own relationships. And for most of us, if that's our idea of what being powerful is, we often denounce it and say, I want no part of that. I would rather be powerless than have power and be destructive or harmful to others. That can be a very deep-seated thread that runs through us. And so we end up disowning our power, feeling victimized, or projecting it onto other people. And that is deeply unfortunate, because there is another kind of power that wants to be expressed through us. It wants to be expressed to those who have compassion, who have wisdom, who have sensitivity and tenderness. It is the power to uplift. It is the power to create. It is the power to inspire and to champion others and to bring in a new collaborative way, one that takes into consideration the whole and the impact on others and is not about domination or dominion over, whether it's the earth and her creatures or our fellow human beings. This is the new power that is emerging, and it is emerging through each of us. It's emerging through those of us who may be the reluctant leaders. It's most needed to come into flowering or fruition through us. So how do we do that? How do we make peace with our power? Well, there are a few ways I want to suggest to you today. One is to just start at the conceptual level or the mindset level. So I always recommend doing some inquiry through writing, through free writing, and today is not any different. So what I'm going to suggest is that you get your journal and a timer and a pen, that you light a candle, and that you really align your intention to go to the deepest truth for you, and that you work with 3 prompts around the subject. And you can set the timer for 5 or 10 minutes. And when you start writing, you just want to write stream of consciousness, whatever emerges. And the first prompt I want to suggest for you is just simply to write out, power is ... and just let yourself write and see what comes through. And the second prompt is, to be powerful, I need to ... and see what comes. And then the last one is, if you see my power, you will ... So spend some time with those, and when you read them over, I strongly recommend that you hold them with compassion and curiosity. Just be open and receptive to what comes through. Another aspect of making peace with our power, coming home to our power, has to do with learning to trust and to come home to the instincts in the body. We come into this life with a full set of trustworthy instincts and impulses within us that are designed to protect us, to keep us safe, to acquire what it is we need, to express ourselves, to be empowered agents in our own life. But then depending on how life or those we're in relationship with responds to us, we learn quickly to either hide those impulses or squelch those impulses or keep them under wraps, because it's a survival issue. We need to maintain a positive, supportive connection with those who are caring for us. And if our potency, if our assertiveness are too strong and we come up in an environment that doesn't welcome or receive that, then we can get some pretty hard consequences. So we start to cut off those aspects of ourself that are not pleasing, or alienate those around us that we're relying on for our survival. Which is why many of us as adult women are still moving through our lives apologizing for who we are, staying small and demure, and not expressing anything that might be distressing or upsetting to those around us. And part of the issue here is that we are still believing that somebody else is the source for what we need in our lives. We're still unconsciously identifying others as having the key to the source of what we need, what we want to create, what we want to put forth in the world, and we have forgotten the fact that we hold the key to our own source. Whether it's for our well-being physically, emotionally, financially, spiritually, psychologically, we hold the key. Nobody else does. So it's really about coming back to our instincts, our needs, our desires, our inner wisdom, those perceptions that we can uniquely see that others may not be able to see. And it requires each of us to work with those places where there is either fear or shame, which are holding us back, which are holding us from stepping up and taking the mantle of responsibility and personal power in our own lives, in our relationships, in our communities, in those places where we can see the need, where we can see the new possibility, and frankly, where we are being called to speak up, to be a voice for that. And again, that may be very personal, being a voice for yourself in your life or in your relationships, or it may be on a much larger scale in terms of being a voice and a champion for an issue that affects others or maybe even affects the whole. So how do we get brave in those ways? How do we kind of put on that mantle, or even imagine like putting on a coat or a cloak that is your personal power? How do we do that, particularly when we're coming out of the good girl paradigm? And often it is a few steps forward and then a step or two back and a few steps forward, because it is an overcoming of a lifetime and maybe even lifetimes of ingrained habit of holding back. So it requires compassion and gentleness with ourselves, as well as firmness and clarity of, yes, this is where I intend to go. This is what I intend to do. So accessing support is always key and critical. Having those people in your lives that can celebrate you and cheer for you when you have that tough conversation or when you share that unpopular truth. This process ties in so many of the threads that we have explored in this podcast in the past. It's all about expressing ourselves, being seen, reclaiming our wild nature, coming home to and trusting the instincts of the body, and creating for ourselves our heart and our soul's desires. Coming back to our desires and knowing we have the capacity to create those. We have the capacity to ask for what we need. This topic is so near and dear to my heart because I came to realize, really just in the last 5 years, that I have spent the better part of my life cut off from my source of power, which for me is my mystical connection. It is my spiritual connection. And I was cut off from that, and I couldn't understand why other people were capable of creating or achieving or doing things in their life, and why I felt so powerless. And then I came to realize, really after the death of my mother, that I had been cut off from my main source of power. It was threatening to those around me. They didn't want to see it, and I learned to hide it very quickly. But the thing is, I was moving through life dissatisfied, feeling dependent on others for my heart and soul's desires in this life. It required me to enter into all kinds of relationship agreements in order to try and get my needs met, which were unnecessary and harmful to myself, and ultimately not good for the other either. So, beloved, we get to be free of that. We get to be free of that old model, that old paradigm. We get to claim our own source for ourselves. We get to root into and tap into our power. We get to co-create with life. We get to choose what we want to choose without apology and wear our truth and our wisdom with dignity and deep satisfaction. So will you join me in that? Can you feel the yes to that for yourself? Let's make 2019 the year you really start to get comfortable and make peace with your power. So a final practice I want to suggest, which was offered to me by a mentor decades ago, is a simple mantra you can use anytime you need a boost or you're feeling unsure of yourself, and it simply goes like this: I am peace, I am power. I am peace, I am power. I am peace, I am power. Give it a try and notice how it shifts your internal state. I find it to be very settling and calming, but also solidifying and expansive. So as we prepare to close, I want to share two things with you. One is the reminder that each month on the new moon, I have my new moon circle, which is a way that I personally am anchoring into the practices that help me connected with my source of power. I'd like to invite you to join me if you feel called to do so. You can always get information and register at newmooncircle.com. And the second thing is I have just completed a free training video, and it's for those of you who are feeling the call to bring your unique body of work out into the world. And maybe you've been feeling stalled out or stuck or not sure how to begin the process. But if you have had years of experience and lots of wisdom that you've cultivated over the years, and you know there's something you're meant to share, but you're not quite sure how to get it out into the world or where to start, or maybe you have so many ideas that you don't know how to refine them or clarify them to move forward, I have created a free training video called Birthing Your Sacred Work in the World, and it outlines the 8 essentials that you need in order to get that work out into the world in an effective way that can then support you in thriving financially. And that's a big key to our personal power in our lives, is having that sense of financial empowerment. And it's a place where so many of us struggle. So anyway, if you're interested in accessing this free training video, I would love to share it with you. You can go to wisewomanprosper.com and you can access it there. Because I want you to get your wisdom and gifts out into the world, and I want you to succeed financially. That is at the heart of us rising together and changing the power dynamic in this world. From power over to a heart-centered, creative, collaborative power that supports the whole. So, beloved, it's been my great joy to be with you today. I'm sending you much love and the reminder to always trust what your heart knows.
Thanks for listening to Trust Your Sacred Feminine Flow with Joni Advent Maher. If you like what you heard, the best compliment you can give us is to share our podcast with a friend and subscribe, rate, and review our podcast at iTunes.